Everyone thought it was going to be the perfect wedding. The church was packed, the flowers were in bloom, and Sophia Matthews stood at the altar in her grandmother's vintage lace gown, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of joy. Father Michael had just stopped the ceremony mid-vow and said something that made every guest freeze in their seats. "I cannot in good conscience allow this marriage to proceed." The silence that followed was deafening. What could make a man of God, who had married hundreds of couples over 30 years, stop a wedding at the most sacred moment? What did he know about the groom that no one else did? And why did Sophia's mother collapse in the front pew when she heard those words? This is the true story of how one priest's decision to break tradition saved a woman's life and exposed a truth so devastating that it tore two families apart. But to understand why Father Michael did what he did that Saturday afternoon in April 2023, we need to go back to where it all began, 6 months earlier, in the small town of Maplewood, Connecticut. What secret was Daniel hiding that made him seem like the perfect fiancé? Why did Father Michael's instincts tell him something was wrong during their counseling sessions? Sophia Matthews was 28 years old, working as an elementary school teacher, and she had almost given up on finding love. She lived in a modest apartment above the town's bookstore, spent her weekends volunteering at the church youth group, and had dinner with her mother every Sunday without fail. Her father had passed away from cancer when she was 19, and since then, it had been just Sophia and her mom, Linda, navigating life together. Then, one October evening, everything changed. Sophia was at Murphy's, the local Irish pub where the teachers often gathered after work on Fridays, when she literally bumped into someone carrying 2 pints of beer. His name was Daniel Carter, and he had just moved to Maplewood 3 weeks earlier to take a position as a financial consultant at the regional bank. He was 32, tall with dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples, and he had a smile that made Sophia's heart do something it hadn't done in years. They talked for 3 hours that night about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his father young too, about his love of old movies and hiking trails. They started dating immediately, and it was the kind of romance that feels almost too good to be true. Daniel would show up at her school with coffee during her lunch break. He remembered every small detail she mentioned in passing. He got along perfectly with her mother, bringing flowers when he came for Sunday dinners. He integrated himself into Sophia's life so seamlessly that within 2 months she couldn't remember what her days had looked like before him. Even Father Michael, who'd known Sophia since she was a child, commented on what a good match they seemed to be. 3 months into the relationship, on a cold January evening, Daniel took Sophia to the lighthouse at Beacon Point and proposed. The ring was beautiful, a simple platinum band with a single diamond. When she called her mother from the car, Linda cried tears of joy and said, "Your father would have loved him, sweetheart. I just know it." They set the wedding date for late April at St. Catherine's, the church where Sophia had been baptized, where her father's funeral had been held. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Sometimes when Daniel's phone rang, he would step outside to take the call, even in the middle of dinner. When she asked about his family, about whether they would be coming to the wedding, his answers were vague. He said his mother had passed away years ago, that he didn't have siblings, that he'd lost touch with most relatives after his father died. Sophia understood. She knew about painful histories, about wanting to focus on the future rather than excavate old wounds, so she didn't push. She told herself that everyone had parts of their past they'd rather keep private, that what mattered was who Daniel was now. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The wedding planning consumed Sophia's spring. She chose soft pink roses and white peonies for the bouquets, found a small string quartet to play during the ceremony. Daniel was supportive but distant during much of the planning, which Sophia attributed to his work. He'd taken on several major clients and was working long hours, often traveling to New York City for meetings. "I'm sorry I can't be more help with the wedding stuff," he told her one night, "but I trust your judgment completely." 6 weeks before the wedding, Father Michael called Sophia and asked if she and Daniel could come by the rectory for their pre-marriage counseling sessions. The first session went well. Daniel was articulate and thoughtful, talking about his respect for Sophia's faith and his commitment to being a partner through whatever challenges life brought. The second session, scheduled for 2 weeks later, was when things began to unravel. Daniel was late to the second counseling session, which was unusual for him. When he finally arrived, 40 minutes after the scheduled start time, he was flustered and apologetic. But Father Michael noticed something in Daniel's demeanor that struck him as off. The young man seemed distracted, kept checking his phone, gave answers that felt rehearsed rather than genuine. At one point, when Father Michael asked about Daniel's previous relationships and whether there was anything from his past that might impact the marriage, Daniel's jaw tightened and he said tersely, "My past is my past, Father. I don't see how it's relevant to my future with Sophia." The response was defensive in a way that felt disproportionate to the question. After they left that evening, Father Michael sat in his office for a long time, troubled by something he couldn't quite name. He had been a priest for 32 years, had counseled hundreds of couples, and he had developed an instinct for when something wasn't quite right. The feeling nagged at him over the following days. He found himself praying about it, asking God for wisdom. 3 days before the third counseling session was scheduled, Father Michael received a phone call that changed everything. The woman on the other end of the line was crying so hard she could barely speak. "Father, my name is Jennifer Carter," she managed to say between sobs. "I need to talk to you about Daniel Carter. I understand he's getting married at your church in 10 days. Please, Father, you have to stop the wedding. He's my husband. We've been married for 8 years, and we have 2 children together." Father Michael felt the blood drain from his face. Jennifer's story poured out in a rush. She and Daniel had married young, right out of college, and they had 2 daughters, ages 6 and 4. They'd lived in Austin, Texas, where Daniel worked in finance and she was a nurse. Their marriage had problems. Daniel drank too much, became controlling and verbally abusive. 2 years ago, he'd lost his job after getting into a physical altercation with a coworker. Jennifer had finally worked up the courage to tell him she wanted a divorce. That's when Daniel disappeared. He'd cleaned out their joint bank account, packed a bag, and vanished one night while Jennifer was working a late shift at the hospital. For 18 months, Jennifer had no idea where her husband was. He'd abandoned her and their daughters completely, leaving them with nothing. Then 3 weeks ago, one of Jennifer's friends had been scrolling through social media and stumbled across Daniel's profile under a slightly different name. He was living in Connecticut, engaged to be married, posting photos of his new life like the family he'd abandoned had never existed. Father Michael's hands were shaking as he took down Jennifer's contact information and asked her to email him every piece of documentation she had. Within an hour, his inbox was flooded with proof. Marriage certificate from Travis County, Texas. Birth certificates for Emma Carter and Sophie Carter. Family photos showing Daniel with Jennifer and 2 beautiful little girls. Bank statements showing the day Daniel had withdrawn every penny they had. Police reports Jennifer had filed when he disappeared. It was all real. Daniel Carter, the man who was supposed to marry Sophia Matthews in 10 days, was a fraud. He was already married. He had abandoned his wife and children, and he had constructed an elaborate lie to trap another innocent woman. Father Michael spent that entire night on his knees in the chapel, praying for guidance. If he stayed silent and allowed this wedding to proceed, knowing what he knew, he would be complicit in Daniel's deception. What would happen to Sophia when Daniel grew tired of her too? Would he drain her bank accounts and disappear in the middle of the night, leaving her as devastated as he'd left Jennifer? By dawn, Father Michael had made his decision. He would talk to Daniel first, give him a chance to come clean, to tell Sophia the truth himself. He called Daniel that morning and asked him to come to the rectory immediately. Daniel arrived an hour later, looking annoyed. "Father, I'm really slammed this week, Daniel said. "Can we reschedule?" Father Michael gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Daniel. We need to talk about Jennifer." The change in Daniel's face was instantaneous. The color drained from his cheeks, and his eyes went cold and hard. "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel said, but his voice was flat, mechanical. Father Michael opened a folder on his desk and pulled out one of the family photos. "Your wife," he said calmly, "and your daughters, Emma and Sophie, the family you abandoned 18 months ago in Austin, Texas." Daniel stared at the photo for a long moment. "That was a different life," Daniel finally said, his voice low. "That was a different person. I'm not that man anymore." Father Michael remained calm. "You're still married to her. You're still the father of those children. You didn't get divorced. You just left. And now you're trying to marry another woman, which is not only morally reprehensible but also illegal. It's bigamy." Daniel stood abruptly, anger flashing across his face. "You don't know anything about what happened in that marriage. Jennifer was impossible. She was controlling and cold, and she made my life hell. I had to get out." Father Michael kept his voice level. "So you abandoned your daughters, 2 little girls who loved you? You took all the money and left them with nothing?" Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "Those kids are better off without me. I did them a favor." Father Michael asked quietly, "And Sophia? Does she know any of this? Does she know she's about to marry a man who's already married?" Daniel leaned forward, placing his palms on Father Michael's desk. "You're not going to tell her," he said, and it wasn't a question, it was a threat. "If you say one word to Sophia, I will destroy you. I'll tell everyone you made inappropriate advances toward me during counseling. I'll sue you and this church for slander." "Get out of my office," Father Michael said quietly, "and you need to tell Sophia the truth before this weekend, or I will." Daniel straightened, adjusting his tie. "You won't," he said confidently. "Sophia won't believe you. She loves me. She trusts me. And if you try to interfere, she'll hate you for it." With that, Daniel walked out. Father Michael sat in the silence, feeling the weight of what he had to do. He had given Daniel a chance to do the right thing, and Daniel had chosen to double down on his deception. He called Linda Matthews that afternoon and asked her to bring Sophia to the rectory that evening. When they arrived, Sophia was glowing with pre-wedding excitement. Father Michael's heart broke as he looked at her, knowing what he was about to destroy. He asked them both to sit down, and he began with a prayer. Then he told them everything. He showed them the documents Jennifer had sent, explained the timeline of Daniel's abandonment of his first family, told them about his confrontation with Daniel that morning. Sophia sat frozen throughout the entire explanation, her face pale, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. Linda started crying almost immediately. When Father Michael finished, Sophia stood up without a word and walked to the window. "Sophia," her mother said softly, but Sophia held up a hand. "Don't," she whispered. For 5 minutes no one spoke. Then Sophia turned around, her face completely dry, her jaw set. "I need to see these documents for myself," she said, her voice steady and cold. Father Michael handed her the folder, and Sophia spent the next half hour examining every piece of paper, every photo. Finally, she closed the folder. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "I know this couldn't have been easy." Her mother reached for her, but Sophia moved away. "I need to go home. I need to think." She was gone before they could stop her. The next morning, Sophia showed up at Daniel's apartment unannounced. She found him in his kitchen, making coffee. "We need to talk," she said from the doorway, and Daniel turned around with his usual smile until he saw her face. "Father Michael told me everything," she said. "About Jennifer, about Emma and Sophie, about the fact that you're still married and you abandoned your family." Daniel's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on wounded innocence. "Sophia, baby, whatever he told you, it's not what you think," he started, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't you dare call me baby. I've seen the marriage certificate. I've seen photos of your daughters. I've seen the police report Jennifer filed when you disappeared with all their money." Daniel's face hardened. "You're going to believe a priest you've known your whole life over me? Over what we have together?" Sophia almost laughed, but the sound that came out was more like a sob. "Everything we have is built on lies. You're married to someone else. You have 2 daughters you abandoned. You let me plan a wedding, let me fall in love with you, and the entire time you were running from your real life." Daniel's voice turned pleading. "What Jennifer and I had, that wasn't a real marriage. I was trapped. I was miserable. What you and I have, Sophia, that's real." Sophia shook her head slowly. "No. The man who abandons his children, that's who you actually are. The man who steals from his wife and disappears in the middle of the night, that's who you are. And I don't know how I didn't see it before." She pulled the engagement ring off her finger and set it on his kitchen counter. "The wedding is off, and if you try to contact me again, I'm calling the police. I'm sure Jennifer would be very interested to know where you've been hiding." Daniel's face twisted with rage. "You're making a huge mistake. You were nothing before me. You were some pathetic schoolteacher living in a shitty apartment, going nowhere. I gave you a chance at a real life." Sophia looked at him, seeing clearly for the first time who this man really was beneath the charm and the lies. "You didn't give me anything, Daniel. You almost took everything. But thanks to Father Michael, you failed." She walked out and didn't look back. She got in her car, drove 3 blocks, pulled over to the side of the road, and finally allowed herself to fall apart. Over the next few days, Sophia and her mother made dozens of calls, canceling everything. Father Michael called her every day, checking on her. Linda practically moved into Sophia's apartment, holding her while she cried, reminding her that this wasn't her fault. 2 weeks after the canceled wedding, Sophia came to the church late one night and found Father Michael in the chapel. She slid into the pew beside him. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again," she said quietly. "How do I move forward from this?" Father Michael was quiet for a moment. "Sophia, what happened to you wasn't about your judgment or your ability to trust. Daniel is a skilled manipulator. He's probably left a trail of broken hearts behind him. You didn't fail. He did. And the fact that you walked away when you learned the truth shows extraordinary strength." Sophia wiped her eyes. "It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like he took something from me I'll never get back." Father Michael nodded. "He took your innocence, in a sense. Your ability to approach love without wariness. And that's a real loss. But the right person, when they come along, won't ask you to ignore your instincts. They won't get defensive when you ask questions. The right person will be patient with your caution and will consistently show you through actions, not just words, that they're worthy of your trust." Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for stopping the wedding," she whispered. "I don't want to think about what would have happened if you hadn't." Father Michael squeezed her shoulder gently. "That's my job, Sophia, to protect the people I care about, even when the truth hurts." 3 months later, Sophia received a letter from Jennifer Carter. Jennifer thanked Sophia for calling the police with Daniel's location, which had allowed her to finally get legal closure. Daniel had been arrested for fraud and had agreed to a divorce settlement that included child support payments and restitution. Jennifer's daughters were in therapy, but were doing better. And Jennifer wanted Sophia to know that she wasn't alone, that she understood the particular pain of being deceived, and that she was rooting for Sophia's healing. Sophia cried reading the letter, but this time the tears felt cleansing. She wrote back immediately, and over the following months, she and Jennifer developed an unlikely friendship. Sophia threw herself into her teaching, into slowly rebuilding her sense of self. She started seeing a therapist who helped her understand how manipulative people identify and exploit vulnerabilities in others. And slowly, painfully, she learned to forgive herself. So here's my question to you. If you were in Father Michael's position, knowing what he knew about Daniel, would you have had the courage to stop the wedding? Or would you have stayed silent and let Sophia make what you knew was a terrible mistake? And if you were Sophia, would you have been able to forgive the person who shattered your dreams, even if they were saving you from something worse? Would you have been able to trust again after being deceived so thoroughly? These aren't easy questions, but I believe Father Michael did the only thing his conscience would allow. He chose truth over comfort, protection over popularity, and in doing so, he saved Sophia from years of pain. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is tell them a truth that will hurt them in the short term, but protect them in the long run. If this story moved you, if it made you think about trust and truth and the courage it takes to intervene when someone you care about is in danger, drop a comment and let us know your thoughts. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next story. Until next time, remember that sometimes God's protection comes through the people brave enough to speak the truth, even when the truth costs them everything.